I feel like to release that self-judgment, you have to become aware of what that voice sounds like and be like, okay, what is my inner critic? Hey besties, welcome to another episode of I Missed Me. I am extremely excited today because I have Carolina with me today. She is the host of Inner Growth, which is a podcast centered around self-growth, and she is also a certified holistic health coach and a hormone specialist. So Carolina, welcome to I Missed Me. So excited to finally meet you and have you here on I Missed Me today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and to be finally meeting in real life. I know we tried to schedule this in Miami, so I'm happy we're doing it in New York this time.
Yeah, so excited. I want to start by asking you what inspired you to start Inner Growth.
Yeah, so I've had Inner Growth, my podcast, for I think it's going to be 3 years in March. So originally it was called Luna, and then I eventually...
Luna?
Yeah.
Oh, that's my dog's name.
I just love the moon, and it started out as kind of a more spiritual podcast, and I talk a lot about astrology. I love astrology, but it eventually kind of evolved on its own, and as I started to reflect more, I realized I wanted to rebrand the podcast and kind of center it more on a name that embodied more what it was about. And at the end of the day, to me, inner growth is just your relationship with yourself and strengthening that connection that you have with yourself. And so I started Inner Growth for that. And now I do inner growth coaching also. So I work one-on-one with people to help them improve their relationship with themselves. And ultimately, inner growth is also just about how do you look inside and change the way you talk to yourself and the way you think about the world and the beliefs that you have and everything going on in your inner world so that you can then create the change in the real, physical world that you want to see.
Is it something that, you went through that triggered your personal inner growth?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. For me, I have been in my own inner growth journey for a really long time. And I think if I really, really trace it back, for me, my inner growth started when I struggled with an eating disorder, so many years ago now, at the end of high school. And in struggling with my confidence and my relationship with my body and with food and with all of that for a few years, I eventually, in 2020, in the very beginning of lockdown, was when I had kind of this rock bottom moment. And that's when I really learned about holistic health. I started to read all these books. I learned to meditate. I started to learn about my birth chart and astrology. I started to just incorporate all these new things into my life, like journaling. And that's when I really started to heal my relationship with my body. And I realized that it wasn't really about food. It wasn't really about my body at the end of the day. It was just the relationship that I had with myself. And so that's kind of how my inner growth journey evolved. Obviously, that's a very, very Spark Notes version of it. But I think from learning how to achieve that inner glow through my own journey, that's what has inspired me to have a platform. Because when I was struggling, there was no one talking about this. There was no one publicly on social media really sharing about their struggles or their healing journey. And so I think that's kind of
How can someone start? How does the journey kind of start?
Yeah, well, I was listening to some of your podcasts, and I know you talk a lot about acceptance, and I think your inner growth journey has to really start with, accepting where you're at and, owning where you're at and being in that acceptance of, okay, maybe I'm not in the best place. Okay, maybe I want to love myself better, or I want to find more connection with myself, or to see better results, or to have better intentions, and realizing that you want something different, but also accepting that you're imperfect and really choosing a different path. I think that's where it really starts. And then there's so many different elements to inner growth. So I think for everyone, their journey is so different. So it's meeting where you are at and then visualizing where you want to go and getting real with yourself about what elements of that reality you're in right now are due to you. What are you contributing to, and what do you have control over, and therefore what can't you change and what can you not change, and kind of starting there.
I think what stops a lot of people from growing from the inside is self-judgment. So what would be your biggest advice when it comes to just stop judging yourself?
That is so real. I think so many people struggle with a very tough inner critic and a lot of self-judgmental thoughts and fears. And I think for a lot of people, the self-judgment a lot of the times is projected as thinking that other people are judging them. So it's realizing, like, what do you think people are judging you for? And maybe realizing that they're actually not judging you about any of those things. You're actually judging yourself, or maybe that's your insecurities. And then kind of flipping it around, being like, how can I accept this? How can I accept that this is an imperfection in my life? Or how can I accept that this is a pattern that is happening? And I feel like leading into your self-awareness journey and like releasing self-judgment is not easy or straightforward.
Yeah.
So I think the first step would probably be that, is like realize what you think people are judging you for, but then also I feel like to release that self-judgment, you have to become aware of what that voice sounds like and be like, okay, what is my inner critic? What does she sound like? Or you can come up with a name for your inner critic, like, and then just start to notice when that voice is activated and realize that's actually not your voice, because the very fact you can notice it means that you are the awareness. And then when you're able to spot those limiting beliefs, spot that self-judgment, that's when you have to catch yourself. And that's when you have to start creating those new beliefs and start being kinder to yourself in that moment when the voice gets loud.
Yeah. What inspired you to become a holistic health coach? Because I had never heard that, like, holistic health, like, coach, like, kind of, you know, just...
like job title, I guess?
Like job title, I guess, yeah. And I, like, recently, when I started interviewing guests, like, I've had, like, 4 in my podcast, and I'm like, wow, like, what inspired you to start?
I'm actually curious, like, if we all got certified in the same way, but I discovered holistic health as a whole, like, not as a path or as a job or anything like that throughout 2020, as I was mentioning. And I remember at that time was when I was starting to meditate. I was doing all these things. And I also started therapy at the time after like many years of needing therapy, but never actually going to start it. And my therapist, I remember being in a call with her and being like, okay, like, this is what I've learned. This is how I'm starting to heal my relationship with my body. And I'm realizing all these things. This is what's helping me. It's meditation. It's journaling. It's courses. It's reading books. It's going on nature walks, it's finding movement I like, it's all these things that's actually helping me feel better. And then she was like, oh, so holistic health. And I was like, oh, is that, like, I didn't even realize there was a word to describe that. Yeah. And then she told me about the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, or IIN, which is where I then went to go get certified. And she actually had done IIN, so I learned about it through my therapist. And then I remember I looked it up, and in the exact moment that I looked it up, I was like, I need to do this program. And that's kind of how I came into it.
So obviously I think a very big part of it is just like having balance in your life, like not overworking yourself or like allowing yourself to rest. How do you personally like maintain balance in your life?
Yeah, I think the topic of balance is so like big on social media these days. Like, everyone's talking about balance and like it's all about balance, it's all about that 80-20 or something like that. And I think that it's funny because it's such an important theme in my life, because I have definitely struggled with being 0 or 100. And right now, like, as a coach, all of my clients pretty much are perfectionists. And I find that perfectionism is very tied to being 0 or 100, because it's like, oh, I either have to do this perfectly or I drop it, or I miss a day of this streak that I'm building and then I'm not motivated to keep it going because I failed. Or it can look like so many different ways, but I find at first being real with like, okay, this is 0 to 100. This is not balance. So what is balance? And to me, I think it's recommitting to things consistently, and constantly is like when you notice that you're falling off of something, or when you notice that you're falling to that perfectionism or that 0 or 100 mindset, and you're like, oh, I like stopped meditating. I had a streak. I was doing so well. I had done 10 days in a row, and then now I'm back to day 1. Instead of being like, okay, I'll do it another time. Like, I'm clearly bad at meditation. Is like, come back to it. And not let yourself get to that 0. Not let yourself completely drop things. And then at the same time with like work and rest, I feel like resting is something we're, as a society, all learning, because we live in such a fast-paced world of like always just like social media, notifications, texts, emails, like at our fingertips. So it has to be a very conscious effort. And for me, I feel like learning to rest is learning that I don't have to do everything right now, is learning how to give yourself boundaries with your phone, with overcommitting to plans, and learning to actually prioritize rest. Because at least for me, I don't know about you, but if I don't consciously like say no to things, it's very easy for me to just always be
Do everything, yeah.
doing everything. So for me, that looks like watching a comfort show, getting into bed a little bit earlier if I can, if I'm at home,
Yeah.
instead of scrolling on my phone in the couch, getting into bed earlier so that on the nights that I have a dinner plan or that I'm out like for drinks with friends or something like that, that those nights it's harder for me to like be in bed by 9 or be in bed by 10. So again, kind of comes down to what can you control and making that a priority.
I don't know if this happens to you, but like for me, I think I've gotten so like obsessed with productivity that when like I'm not being productive, I feel super guilty about not being productive. So like, what is your biggest advice when it comes to just like giving grace to yourself, and like it's okay to rest, and how to like get rid of that guilt when you're not doing anything, because it's okay to not do anything.
I resonate with that a lot. And I was literally going to point that out because I was listening to your podcast and you're like, oh, I'm releasing 3 episodes a week. And you're like posting, 5 TikToks a day. You're like super consistent. So I can imagine how like you are someone who probably struggles with the same things. Yeah. And I think that to give yourself that grace, at least to me, what helps me the most is just basically telling myself like, this is a career that I want to last me for so many years and like for the long run. So I need to build it sustainably. Like I need to build at a pace that I can keep up, and just telling myself like I have time. Like there is so much time, and having that abundance mindset with time, I think is a way to kind of break out of that guilt. And again, realizing it's a 0 or 100. And like if you are falling to the 100, maybe you're just in a really busy season of life. Yeah. But if you find that it's something that's always the case, then maybe it's worth like reflecting or journaling on like, why do I feel this lack mindset around time? Or like, why do I feel I have to do all these things? If not, I feel guilty. And then that's maybe a way to like work around.
So again, you mentioned you do one-on-one coaching sessions. What is the like most common question that you get when it comes to like the sessions?
I don't know if there's one single question, but there's definitely themes.
Yeah.
When I first started coaching, or like when I graduated from my coaching program, it took me actually a little while to figure out who I wanted to work with, because you can do so many things as a holistic health coach, and you can work with many different clients. And for me, it took me a while to like really get clear on that. And so for me, my ideal client is perfectionistic, probably high achieving or type A woman that struggles with balance and falls to that 0 or 100. And so it's kind of in that like yo-yo pattern of overdoing things or not doing them at all. And it's kind of the question you already asked is like, how do you find balance? Like, how do you create that for yourself? And so I end up working with my clients a lot on like, how do you change your self-talk? Like, how do you start being kinder to yourself? And then at the same time, how do you come up with a lifestyle that is loving, that you're doing for the right reasons, but then also it's going to be something you can maintain because you're not like overdoing it right away. For sure. So it's not really an answer to your question, but
I think that helping like others will always be easier than like helping yourself. So you could be helping someone like to get through perfectionism, but you might be pressuring yourself to be perfection like yourself. So have you ever gone through that? And like, how do you deal with that when it's like, I'm helping people like not be obsessed with productivity, but I am myself obsessed with productivity. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think that's the most interesting part of coaching is like a lot of the times it's a mirror, and like you see yourself in the people you work with, or people are attracted to you because they see themselves in you. And you're completely right. I think all of the things that I work with clients on are things I've gone through myself and sometimes am still struggling with. Perfectionism definitely being one of them. And I think as a self-employed person or like an entrepreneur, it's like you're your own boss. So a lot of the times it's really easy to fall to that kind of like pattern of being like, I can always be doing more. Like technically the sky is the limit and there's no one giving you like KPIs, being like, okay, this is your annual goal. Yeah. Because I've been in a corporate job before and like it's very much like that, but when you're self-employed, that's not the case. So I think for me, with being like kind of like obsessed with productivity or like always wanting to be doing something, I think what has helped me the most with that is honestly my relationship. Like, my husband is kind of like
married.
I'm married. I'm recently married.
Gosh.
I actually have a specific situation because we got engaged and then we eloped 2 months later. But then we're also planning like our big wedding, which is going to be this year. So we are technically married, but we're also engaged at the same time still, kind of. But anyway, he is very much not a perfectionistic person, maybe in some ways, but definitely not the same ways as me.
Yeah.
And so I think when I'm being really harsh on myself and when I'm like looking at a post or looking at something that I'm working on and I'm being really harsh on it, having someone else mirror back to me like that's not necessarily the case, or even having an abundance mindset and looking at everything else that is working and affirming that helps me a ton. Is just being like, okay, maybe this one thing is not working right now, but what else is? Like, look at everything else around you. And I think shifting that perspective can be really helpful because it's really hard to do everything perfectly all of the time. And you have to kind of shift priorities throughout your journey. So I think that helps me a ton.
I didn't know you were married. I did not. What do you think are the key to a healthy relationship?
Communication, 100%.
You think so?
I think so because I think in all of my past relationships of any kind, like romantic or not, when there has not been open and honest and real communication, like proactive communication, when things are not said or when you make assumptions, usually that kind of is like a little dropper that you're adding to a cup, and at some point it overflows and spills out everywhere. So I feel like just being really honest and finding ways to express, essentially having nonviolent communication as much as you can, and just being like an active listener at the same time is the best thing. And I think that's something that we definitely have in our relationship, is being able to talk about the difficult things and the things that hurt you or bother you, and just being really, really real with your partner.
With people that like, I think people that like listen to our podcast essentially are like going through breakups or friendship breakups, or like have a lot of trouble with their relationships. How do you like identify like the difference between a healthy or non-healthy relationship with like you're like in the relationship, when it's like obviously you're married now, but friendships can break your heart as well. So I think just like knowing how to identify when to leave or when a relationship gets toxic.
Yeah. I think that in that specific situation, like, okay, how do you know when you need to leave a relationship? What I always say if I'm talking to a friend who's kind of in that situation is there is a book called Dear Sugar, which is an amazing book. And it's basically written by this woman who used to have a column, like an advice column called Dear Sugar. And it's kind of like a compilation of a bunch of questions that people submitted and then her answers that she put on her column. Yeah. And there is this one chapter that is so good. And it's basically like 4 different letters from 4 different people in completely different stages of their life. And all of them had a similar underlying feeling of like, I need to leave this relationship. Like, I don't know, one of them was like married for many years. One of them was like just recently into a relationship. I don't remember the others, but it was kind of something like that. And what she says is sometimes you just have a little voice inside of your head that is basically saying like, leave. Like, even if it makes no sense, even if there wasn't a big fight, even if there was no one reason for you to justify wanting to leave that relationship, if you don't listen to that voice, eventually it will scream, or eventually it will cause you to like sabotage the relationship subconsciously so that you have a reason or like an out. So if you have that voice inside of you, which if you are in a toxic relationship or a relationship that is not right for you, or friendship or anything like that, you will know deep inside, because you will feel bad. Like, you will not feel lifted up, or you will feel judged, or you won't feel supported, or it will feel like a competition, any of those things, or you won't feel understood or heard. It will be speaking inside, and you just have to like honor that voice. I think for a lot of people, they stay in relationships because there is no one main reason of being like, okay, this happened and this really hurt me, and therefore I'm gonna break up with you. And then people just stay in relationships because that never happens. But sometimes the knowing is already there, so you just have to honor it, and it's really, really hard to do that.
I think obviously like for people who are like self-aware and you talk about like all of these topics on your podcast, you're super intentional and like careful with who you give your time to because you understand like the importance of time. So what are those like non-negotiables that you have in your life of like people have to have this, or they have to inspire me, or they have to like want to make me grow, or they have to like bring this to the table for me to like be able to like give you my time? What are those for you?
That is such a good question. I just want to first like kind of enforce what you said, because that's recently been a big theme in my life. I think I'm at a point where I'm realizing like I have a lot on my plate, and so time is really valuable, and quality over quantity is so, so true. When I was younger, I always thought like more friends, more people at my party, more is always better. And I think it's because I moved to the US when I was very young, and like I struggled when I was like a kid with feeling left out, and so I always wanted to feel like supported or to have a lot of friends, and so that's why I kind of fell into that pattern of like always saying yes to things, always wanting more friends. And I think it's important to realize that like, first of all, you cannot give your time to everyone, because you also have to give your time to yourself. And then also, some people don't have the best intentions. Like some people want to be around you because they want to mooch your energy, or they're jealous and they're not really a good friend. So I think for me, I don't want to say non-negotiables, but like important qualities that I look for in friends specifically is people that are positive, like people that are able to see the good. Because obviously there's a lot of hard stuff in the world, but I think people who have that more optimistic outlook are people I like surrounding myself with. Also people that inspire me, like people that feel supportive and that can see my growth and celebrate it, and that I feel that genuine support from. But people who are also freaking amazing and that I want to learn from, and that I want to grow from, and that I want to grow with. I think that's really important to me. And also because I have struggled for many, many years with body image and with healing my relationship with food, and that's basically what I talk about a lot in my podcast and like help people with, and that's a huge part of my life. I choose to stray away maybe from people who I notice like talk about those things still with that diet culture mindset, and who seem really closed off. Not people who are like actively seeking healing and are like, okay, I'm aware that I have this, that I've had this hurt, or that I've had this wound, or and I'm actively like wanting to become better or curious about how to heal. It's like if that's just the way they are, I find that to be energy that doesn't resonate as much with me.
What's your opinion on like today's like society's diet culture, and like the biggest misconception that you think people have to like get rid of when it comes to like diet culture and like social media, food related and stuff?
I think the number one thing that comes to mind is that smaller is better. Like a lot of people associate like really, really like you being skinny or you being really small with that being like the healthiest people. But literally, like, first of all, genetics plays a huge role and it's a real thing. But second, like there are people that are maybe even underweight and have like super high cholesterol, or eat McDonald's every single day. Like someone being small doesn't necessarily mean they're the healthiest person. And so I think that is a really important thing for people to understand, and that like truly what matters and for you to be really healthy is nourishing your body, is doing things out of love, is working on your self-talk and being intentional about why you do certain things. And that the way you look doesn't necessarily actually it does not equate to your worth, to any of those things. But I do think social media makes that really hard sometimes, because with TikTok, for example, it's like we only see a sliver of a person's life. We see people for 30 seconds, and people do judge a book by its cover a lot of the times.
Like what I eat in a day videos and stuff. So
yeah, and I definitely share what I eat in a day and stuff like that, but I don't body check in my first clip of my what I eat in a day. And like the purpose of me sharing is because people love my food recipes and stuff. So it's literally just to give people inspiration and to show like, how do I incorporate more protein in my day, or how do I like make healthy food fun? And I don't like giving off then the vibe of like eat this way to look like me.
yeah.
Or even being like in the what I eat in a day, it's like the workout that you did. Because I think that sends off the wrong message of like you need to earn your food, or like, oh, I ate this much and I worked out this much. So I think there are some things to look out for in those videos for sure.
Carolina, thank you so much for being with me today. Before our last question, I do have a little gift. I have a clothing brand. So for our last question, what does healing mean to you?
To me, Healing means accepting yourself. It means choosing to love yourself even if you're not perfect, and choosing to do difficult things like becoming more aware of yourself, or journaling, or meditating, or choosing the difficult things that aren't necessarily your comfort zone, but that you know will take you to your future self, and being on that active journey of finding yourself again at every stage of life.
I love that. What's your biggest piece of advice for a stranger?
You're enough. Even if society makes you feel like you're not, there's so much beauty inside of you. And once you realize that you are whole, worthy, and complete, you shine different, and you connect with that worth from a new place.
I love that. Thank you so much, Carolina. Where can people find you?
Thank you. If you guys want to connect with me, you can listen to my podcast, Inner Growth, everywhere you listen, and also it's on YouTube. And you can also follow me at The Carolina Lifestyle on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. And if you want to work one-on-one with me, you can find all of that in any of my link in bio sites. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to follow I Missed Me podcast on all social media. Don't forget to go get your No Name hoodie at nonameproject.co. Don't forget to follow me on my personal social media at Mafe. And I will see you guys on our next episode. We're all strangers season together with love. Mafe.